All right, so buckle up, everybody, because we're about to go deep into some seriously dark territory today.
Yeah, this one is,
We're going to do a deep dive
yeah.
into the life and crimes of Samuel Little.
You know,
This guy is
the heavy one.
considered by the FBI to be the most prolific serial killer in U.S. history.
Yeah, it's almost unbelievable. It's just how this guy was active for decades.
Right.
And just flew under the radar for so long.
Yeah, it really makes you wonder how somebody could commit so many horrific acts and remain undetected for so long.
Yeah.
We're talking at least 60 confirmed victims.
Yeah.
With the possibility of dozens more.
Yeah.
So we'll be basing this deep dive
What?
on Little's Wikipedia entry,
Yeah.
which is a real eye-opener to say the least.
Yeah.
But what's so fascinating about this case
What?
is that we're not just going to lay out the chilling details of his crimes.
Right.
We're going to try to understand, like,
Get into the
the factors that allowed him to operate for so long.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how he was able to do that for
Right.
so long.
So let's unpack this, starting with Samuel Little's early life.
Okay.
He was born in 1940 in Georgia.
Yeah.
And get this, he was abandoned by his teenage mother,
Wow.
who was a prostitute.
Oh, wow.
There's even a chance he was actually born in jail.
Yeah, think about the impact of that.
Oh.
Kind of start in life.
Yeah.
Talk about trauma.
Yeah, early trauma
And instability.
and instability right from the get-go.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it seems like those early, cracks only widened as Little grew up.
Yeah.
He was raised by his grandmother in Ohio.
Okay.
And even during his school years, there were red flags.
Okay.
Disciplinary problems, struggles with academics,
Yeah.
the usual stuff.
Right.
But here's where things take a truly disturbing turn.
Okay.
Little claimed that his violent fantasies began in kindergarten
Wow.
when he saw his teacher touch her neck.
Oh, wow.
It's a seemingly, innocuous gesture. But for him, it triggered this fascination with choking women.
Yeah.
He even said this fascination grew as he collected true crime magazines as a teen.
It's amazing.
It's like, great.
It's terrifying how a
Yeah.
seemingly ordinary event
Yeah.
can have such a profound and twisted impact on someone's mind.
It makes you wonder, could this have been like a pivotal moment?
Yeah, was this a defining moment or were
Yeah,
there
yes.
other
Were there
forces at play?
Yeah.
I mean, his criminal record started early.
Cool.
Just 16 years old when he was convicted of breaking and entering,
Wow.
which landed him in a juvenile facility.
Okay, so that seems to have been just the beginning.
And that seems to have been the beginning of a very dangerous
A
escalation.
very dangerous escalation.
Right.
Yeah.
From there, you see this pattern of increasingly serious offenses, theft, assault, attempted rape, fraud, even attacks on government officials.
Wow.
His criminal activities spanned 11 states. And to add another layer to his persona,
Okay.
he claimed to have a background in boxing.
So he's got this history of violence
Right.
and aggression, and he's comfortable using his physicality to get what he wants.
Right. And that's
Yeah.
where things start to get really dangerous.
Okay.
In 1982, he was actually charged with the murder of 22-year-old Melinda Rose LaPree.
Wow.
But a grand jury declined to indict him,
Wow.
even though he was a prime suspect.
Talk about a missed opportunity.
Yeah.
Makes you wonder how many lives could have been saved if you didn't stop then.
Yeah, it's a chilling thought for sure.
Yeah.
But the pattern of evading justice didn't stop there.
Oh, no.
Later, he was tried for the murder of Patricia Ann Mount.
Mhm.
And despite witness testimonies, he was acquitted.
So 2 potential murders, and he walks free both times.
Yeah.
Was he manipulating the system somehow?
It's a really insightful observation. There's
Yeah.
definitely a pattern of targeting women who were less likely to be believed or even missed,
Yeah.
often those on the margins of society.
Right. And that brings us to this pivotal period in his life, his time in California.
Right.
This seems to be where the violence took a terrifying leap forward.
Right. It all started in San Diego, where he attacked Lori Barros.
Mhm.
She was kidnapped, beaten, and strangled, but incredibly, she survived.
Wow.
But here's the chilling part. Just a month later, police found him with another unconscious woman in his car. Same MO.
It's mind-boggling
Right.
how quickly he moved from one attack to another.
Yeah.
It's like he was operating with this chilling sense of impunity.
And despite this clear pattern of violence,
Yeah.
he only served 2.5 years for that attack.
Wow.
Then, upon his release, he moved straight to Los Angeles, and that's where the body count really starts to climb.
It's almost as if those brief stints in prison had no deterrent effect on him,
Yeah.
if anything.
It's like they fueled his darkness. This idea of these near misses with justice is something we'll revisit.
Right.
It really raises questions about how we deal with repeat offenders, especially those who prey on vulnerable individuals.
Absolutely.
But for now,
Yeah.
we have this image of Samuel Little slipping further into the shadows, leaving a trail of victims across the country.
And it would take a seemingly mundane...
And it would take a seemingly mundane event to finally bring him down.
Wait, are you talking about his arrest in 2012?
That's the one.
Yeah.
He was picked up for a narcotics charge at a homeless shelter in Louisville, Kentucky.
So something as simple as a drug charge is what finally catches this prolific serial killer.
It might seem that way at first glance.
It seems almost anticlimactic.
But this arrest was actually the key that unlocked a much larger and more horrifying story.
Right.
Remember, this was 2012.
Yeah.
And DNA technology was starting to play a major role in criminal investigations.
So this routine arrest leads to a DNA match.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They ran his DNA
Yeah.
and found a match to 3 unsolved murders of women in Los Angeles, all dating back to the 1980s.
Wow. So that's when the floodgates open.
You got it.
Yeah.
Those initial matches were just the tip of the iceberg.
Okay.
They ended up linking him to dozens of other unsolved murders nationwide.
Suddenly, law enforcement realizes they have a serial killer of unimaginable scope on their hands.
Imagine the shockwaves that sent through the justice system.
Yeah. A monster who's been operating right under their noses for decades.
Right.
It must have been like a frantic race against time to piece together this massive, horrifying puzzle.
So in 2014, he was finally convicted for those 3 Los Angeles murders and received 3 life sentences.
Okay.
But here's the kicker.
Yeah.
Even with the evidence stacked against him, he maintained his innocence throughout the entire trial.
It's hard to comprehend that level of denial and lack of remorse.
Right.
But wait, there's more to the story, right?
You're right, there is.
Yeah.
And this is where things take another shocking turn.
Okay.
Little began confessing to murders in exchange for a prison transfer. He wanted to be moved out of the Los Angeles County Prison.
Wow.
And what he revealed during these confessions was utterly horrifying.
So even after his conviction,
It was.
this case keeps unfolding.
He started detailing murders spanning decades and multiple states,
Yeah.
painting a truly gruesome picture of his crimes.
Revealing a level of violence we're only beginning to grasp.
It's a chilling reminder that even when we think justice has been served,
Yeah.
the full truth can be far more complex and disturbing.
Right.
And for the families of his victims,
Yeah.
it means reopening old wounds and searching for answers that may never fully come.
It's heartbreaking to think that for these families, the nightmare never truly ends.
It really underscores the fact that for the families impacted by his crimes, the search for answers and closure can be a lifelong struggle.
It's a heavy truth to confront.
It is.
So let's dig into those confessions.
Yeah.
What kind of insights did they offer about his victims and the methods he used?
Okay.
Um,
His confessions paint a disturbing picture of his modus operandi. Imagine you're looking at a case where the killer deliberately targets women who are already marginalized and vulnerable: sex workers, drug users, homeless individuals,
Right.
women whose disappearances might not be immediately noticed or thoroughly investigated.
Yeah, it raises a disturbing question. How many more women like this might have been saved if they hadn't been overlooked by the system?
Right.
It makes you think about societal biases
Yeah.
and how law enforcement practices can sometimes fail certain communities.
Yeah. And what's even more chilling
Yeah.
is that Little was acutely aware of this vulnerability.
Wow.
He actually admitted that he chose these victims because he believed they would be, in his own words, less dead.
That phrase "less dead" is just bone-chilling.
Just,
It really highlights this
Yeah.
dehumanizing perspective he had of his victims,
Yeah.
as if their lives were somehow disposable.
Exactly.
Yeah.
His confessions weren't just about admitting guilt.
Right.
They were a window into the mind of a killer who saw himself as almost untouchable. Yeah.
Someone who could operate above the law by preying on those society often forgets.
It's a stark reminder that we need to do better,
Yeah.
to be more vigilant,
Don't need to.
and to ensure that everyone, regardless of their circumstances, is protected and valued.
Absolutely.
But let's get into some specifics.
Okay.
What do we know about the victims who have been identified?
Thanks to the tireless efforts of investigators and advancements in DNA technology,
Uh-huh.
many of Little's victims have been identified.
Okay.
Take Carol Linda Alford, for instance.
Okay.
She was 41 years old when she was murdered.
Wow.
And her DNA was actually found under Little's fingernails,
Oh, wow.
directly linking him to her death.
That level of forensic detail is both horrifying and crucial in securing justice.
Right.
It eliminates any doubt about his guilt and hopefully provides some measure of closure for the families, even if it's a painful one.
Absolutely. Another confirmed victim was 32-year-old Denise Christie Brothers,
Okay.
a mother of two who vanished in 1994.
Wow.
Little confessed to her murder and even guided authorities to her remains.
It's hard to imagine the anguish her family must have endured, wondering about her fate for all those years.
You're right.
In a way, those confessions, while disturbing, have offered answers.
Absolutely.
And a measure of justice for families who have lived with unanswered questions for far too long.
Yeah.
You know?
You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
These details, while difficult to process, are essential in providing closure and accountability.
Yeah.
And then there's the disturbing aspect of his method of killing,
Yeah.
strangulation.
He does seem like he had a real fixation on that method.
He did.
Why strangulation?
Well, he would often knock his victims unconscious first
Oh, wow.
and then strangle them to death.
Okay.
Experts believe this method suggests a desire for control, a need to dominate his victims in their final moments.
It's a level of cruelty that's truly difficult to grasp.
It is.
He not only took these women's lives,
Right.
but subjected them to a terrifying and agonizing death. And the fact that he often targeted women who were already struggling,
Yeah.
battling addiction, homelessness,
Right.
just adds another layer of tragedy to this story.
Yeah.
It highlights how susceptible vulnerable populations are to becoming prey for predators like Little.
It's a chilling reminder of how important it is to provide greater support and protection for those living on the margins of society.
Right.
They're often the most vulnerable,
Right.
the most likely to be overlooked, and
Yeah.
as we see in Little's case, tragically susceptible to becoming victims of horrific crimes.
Absolutely.
But going back to his confessions,
Okay.
how many murders did he ultimately claim to have committed?
He claimed a staggering 93 murders.
Wow.
The FBI has been diligently working to corroborate these confessions, matching them to unsolved cases and unidentified remains.
All right.
It's a massive and ongoing effort, but it's crucial work.
So even after his death in 2020, this investigation continues. It really speaks to the commitment of law enforcement to uncover the truth and seek justice for every victim, no matter how much time has passed.
It's not just about catching the killer.
Right.
It's about understanding the broader context of his crimes.
Yeah.
How was he able to evade capture for so long?
Right.
What systemic issues allowed him to prey on vulnerable women?
Right.
And what lessons can we learn to prevent future tragedies?
It's almost like assembling a giant, horrifying puzzle.
Right.
And with each confession, another piece falls into place.
And as those pieces come together, they reveal not just the horrific truth about Samuel Little,
Right.
but also some uncomfortable truths about ourselves.
Right.
We have to examine the blind spots in our justice system,
Yeah.
the societal biases that render some less dead than others,
Right.
and the urgent need to protect those most vulnerable in our communities.
It's a lot to process.
It is.
Both emotionally and in terms of the sheer scope of his crimes.
Right.
But it's important that we don't shy away from it.
Absolutely.
We confront this darkness head on.
And while the details of this case are incredibly disturbing,
Yeah.
there's a glimmer of hope
Yeah.
in the fact that Little also drew portraits of many of his victims.
Wait, he drew pictures of them?
He did.
Really?
The FBI actually released these drawings to the public,
Wow.
hoping that someone might recognize them and help identify more of his victims.
That's a remarkable effort by law enforcement, even years after his conviction, to continue seeking justice for every victim.
It speaks volumes about their dedication to this case.
Yeah.
And, it also highlights the power of art,
Yeah.
even in such a dark and twisted context,
Yeah.
to potentially bring closure and answers to families who have been searching for so long.
It's a poignant reminder that even in the face of unimaginable horror, there's still a possibility for redemption, for using the lessons we learn from tragedy to create a more just and compassionate world.
Absolutely.
So where do we go from here?
Yeah.
How do we make sense of this case and move forward?
Right. Yeah, it's a question we should all be asking ourselves. Yeah. We can't just shake our heads and move on.
Well,
We
yeah.
need to take a hard look at the systemic failures that allowed Little to operate for so long.
Yeah, why weren't those early crimes taken more seriously?
Exactly.
How did he manage to manipulate the system and avoid accountability for decades?
I know. nuts.
It's so frustrating to see all those missed opportunities,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, those feelings are completely valid.
All those moments where he could have been stopped, you
Of
know?
course.
It's hard not to feel a sense of anger and even helplessness.
But we can channel that frustration into action.
Yeah.
Think about it. We need to take a closer look at how law enforcement agencies communicate,
Okay.
how they share information, and how they approach investigations,
Yeah.
especially when it comes to marginalized victims.
So it's not just about catching the killer after the fact.
Exactly.
It's about preventing future killers from emerging.
Right. And that means addressing the root causes,
Okay.
the inequalities that create vulnerabilities, the
Yeah.
biases that can lead to cases being overlooked or dismissed.
It's like shining a light on the darkest corners of our society and saying,
Right.
we see you.
Exactly.
We will not tolerate this.
It's a call to action for all of us.
Right.
We need to be more aware, more vigilant, and more vocal about demanding justice for all.
Yeah.
We can't afford to be complacent.
You know, as we wrap up this deep dive into Samuel Little's life and crimes, I'm struck by the weight of it all.
I know.
The sheer number of lives lost.
Yeah.
The pain inflicted on so many families.
Yeah, and it's there's still so much
But I also see a glimmer of hope.
to uncover.
Yeah.
And
In the ongoing efforts to identify his victims,
Mhm.
to bring closure to their loved ones, and to learn from the mistakes that were made.
And ultimately, that's what we have to take away from this.
Yeah.
It's a sobering reminder that evil exists. But it's also a call to action,
Yeah.
to be more vigilant, to fight for justice, and to work towards creating a world where vulnerable individuals are protected and valued.
I think this is a powerful message to leave with our listeners.
It is.
You know, remember the victims of Samuel Little.
Absolutely.
Let their stories be a reminder that we each have a responsibility to speak up,
Yep.
to advocate for those who are often overlooked,
Yeah.
and to demand a justice system that truly protects everyone, regardless of their background or circumstances.
We can't afford to forget them. We
Right.
can't let their stories fade into the shadows.
Yeah.
Their lives mattered.
Right.
And by remembering them, by learning from this tragedy, we can strive to create a world where such atrocities are never repeated.
Yeah, that's a good note to end on.
I think so.
Yeah, it feels like we've just been going down this rabbit hole of
Big time.
darkness, trying to understand the mind of a killer and the scope of his crimes.
Yeah.
But you're right. Amidst all this horror,
Mm-hmm.
there's a glimmer of hope in those portraits, in the ongoing efforts to identify his victims.
It's,
But where do we go from here?
yeah, where do we go?
How do we make sense of all this and ensure something like this never happens again?
Well, it's a question we should all be asking ourselves, you know? We can't just shake our heads and move on.
Right.
We need to take a hard look at the systemic failures that allowed Little to operate for so long.
Yeah, why weren't those early crimes taken more seriously? How did he manage to manipulate this system and
Yeah.
avoid accountability for decades?
You know, it's so frustrating to see all those missed opportunities.
It is. It's
All those moments where he could have been stopped, you know?
I know those feelings are completely valid.
It's hard not to feel a sense of anger and even helplessness.
Yeah, but we can channel that frustration into action.
How?
You know, we need to take a closer look at how law enforcement agencies communicate,
Okay.
how they share information.
Right. How they approach investigations, especially when it comes to marginalized victims.
So it's not just about catching the killer after the fact.
Right.
It's about preventing future killers from emerging.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that means addressing the root causes.
Right.
You know, the inequalities that create vulnerabilities, the biases that can lead to cases being overlooked or dismissed.
It's like shining a light on the darkest corners of our society
Right.
and saying, we see you, we will not tolerate this, you know.
Exactly. It's a call to action for all of us.
Right.
You know, we need to be more aware, more vigilant, and more vocal about demanding justice for all.
Yeah.
We can't afford to be complacent.
You know, as we wrap up this deep dive into Samuel Little's life and crimes, I'm struck by the weight of it all.
It's a lot.
You know, the sheer number of lives lost,
It is.
the pain inflicted on so many families.
Yeah, and you know, there's still so much to uncover.
But I also see a glimmer of hope in the ongoing efforts to identify his victims, to bring closure to their loved ones,
Absolutely.
and to learn from the mistakes that were made.
And ultimately, that's what we have to take away from this.
Yeah,
It's a sobering reminder that evil exists,
right.
but it's also a call to action, to be more vigilant, to fight for justice,
Yeah.
and to work towards creating a world where vulnerable individuals are protected and valued.
I think that's a powerful message to leave with our listeners.
It is.
Remember the victims of Samuel Little.
Absolutely.
Let their stories be a reminder that we each have a responsibility to speak up,
Yes.
to advocate for those who are often overlooked,
Yeah.
and to demand a justice system that truly protects everyone, regardless of their background or circumstances.
We can't afford to forget them. We
Right.
can't let their stories fade into the shadows.
Their lives mattered.
Their lives mattered, and by remembering them,
Yeah.
by learning from this tragedy,
Right.
we can strive to create a world where such atrocities are never repeated.
Well, thank you for taking this deep dive with me.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
This has been really eye-opening,
Absolutely.
and I hope everybody listening got something out of it.
I hope so too.
And we'll see you all next time.
See ya!